It's Julian Assange and WikiLeaks that have returned honor to journalism. Julian is a truth teller, and that's what has upset those who continue what Goebbels called the big lie.
That's a photo of me at John's house in London from 2017. That was John Pilger at the very top, who has really been the bedrock of this program, Assange Countdown to Freedom. He's been on this show 30 or 40 times and really has made it a solid program. He is our special guest today, John Pilger, the most accomplished journalist of my lifetime, filmmaker, author. He is a redoubtable figure, and I'm very happy to have him on today. I always get nervous when I have John on, or anxious, because I can never come up with the right introduction. It's like introducing Beethoven. What do you come up with? Right? Sonata here, symphony there. But I just have to make one announcement that there will be a vigil rally on the 10th, International Human Rights Day, at the UK British Embassy on 47th and 2nd Avenue. So that's at December 10th, 1 p.m. If you need any information, you can email me at assangecountdown@gmail.com or nycfreeassange@gmail.com. Later on, we will have Afshin Rattansi, the host of and producer of Going Underground. That program is now above ground and coming back into action in a couple of weeks. Thank goodness for that. All right, so here we're going to go play, and the band played Waltzing Matilda, and come back with John. Now, this is a version that Julian Assange recommended that I play 5 or 6 years ago, and it's by June Tabor. We'll be right back.
I was a young man, I carried me pack, and I lived the free life of the rover. From the Murray's green basin to the dusty outback, I waltzed my Matilda all over. Then in 1915 the country said, son, it's time to stop rambling, there's work to be done. And they gave me a tin hat and they gave me a gun, and they sent me away to the wall. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as our ship pulled away from the quay. Amidst all the cheers, the flag waving and tears, we sailed off to Gallipoli.
Okay, I forgot to identify. I'm Randy Credico, and this is Randy Credico Live on the Fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City, also on the Progressive Radio Network. You see, I get anxious, John, and I got to tell you something. I'm thinking about it all night. John Pilger joins us right now. Thinking about it all night. I'm watching your films, the War You Don't See, the Coming War on China, which we're going to play. You're not going to see it. You people are not going to see it. We're playing that in the second hour here on WBAI today. We're playing excerpts from both films, and they couldn't be more timely than at this juncture in history, John. Welcome back.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for those generous words. Far too generous. And just really good to see your smiling face again.
Yours too. I wish I had a cup of your coffee, but I had to settle on a big gulp from 7-Eleven, the only place that's open here on this Thanksgiving, which I really don't celebrate. I think I'm going to fast today. John, you made made my work a little easier today because I read for 3 times last night and this morning this article that you wrote from a speech that you gave in Norway back on September 6th, which was, I mean, this is a perfect piece of journalism, really flawless. And it was turned into an article, and it's on your website. It's the very first article. Everyone should read it. It was listed on September 8th, 2 days after that speech in Norway. And John, you begin this article with an occurrence where you met Lenny Wiesenthal, the propagandist filmmaker for the Third Reich. Lenny Wiesenthal, I think we may have a photo of her. There she is with the Fuhrer, and the Triumph of the Will. And you had this conversation with her, John. Can you just give us a little more? This was in Kenya. Can you give a little backdrop of how that occurred?
Yes, I was in Kenya, and I was staying in a lodge which was near a major game park on the border with then Tanganyika. And there are only about half a dozen people staying in the lodge at the time. And I realized that I was sitting opposite somebody I recognized, wasn't quite sure at first who she was. Then it came back, Lenny Riefenstahl. Lenny Riefenstahl, of course, was an absolutely brilliant documentarian and filmmaker. She was also Hitler's, probably his favorite propagandist. She made such epic films as Triumph of the Will. So she, through a lot of good luck, I would think, and contacts in the Allied forces, when it was all over, she managed to escape prosecution, as those she knew very closely, of course, were either tried and often executed for their war crimes. But Lenny went to Africa to live there. And on this particular evening, she was with her husband. And having recognized her, I asked her. She was a little constrained at first, but then she happily talked about it. It seemed to me that was there any comparison between, in her view, I suppose, between the silence among so many in the German public, silence in terms of protest, when the Nazi regime took firm hold, and with the various silences in our society. Now, our own society, post-war society, this was the 1970s, I have to say. And she drew a comparison. She said that there was the I can't.
Submissive void.
Yeah.
Submissive void.
Thank you. She said, then there was a submissive void in Germany. Now, she said, there is a submissive void. And she described, in other words, the acceptance of so much that is perhaps wrong and harmful in our societies without protest as a submissive void. But the chilling thing was she compared it with the state that she knew very well.
And you asked her, what this submissive void, did it include liberals, educated Germans, and bourgeoisie? And she said, what did she say? She said, more than anyone was
Yeah,
there.
they were the majority. I said, but surely these people afflicted with this submissive void, this silence, saying nothing, were a minority. She said, no. And they were surely not the liberal people, the good, polite society people, the people from the middle class. No. I'm paraphrasing her here, but this is what she said. And she said that they were, in effect, the majority. And I have to say, having just finished one of the most astonishing books I've read, Randy, called Alone in Berlin, and I do recommend it. It was written originally in German and only translated 20 or so years ago, and it tells the story that really backs up what Leni Riefenstahl was saying, and is a lesson for all of us that the longer our silences, then the more they, that is, those who are changing our societies at great speed and recklessly and threatening our lives, the longer they will get away with it.
When you talk about, back then you had Goebbels, you had her, you had other filmmakers that propagandized. And so you say, well, today we live in this society where you have the internet, you have social media, so we really have access and we're free and this and that. And you say, are we? Are we really any different? You said that media society right now has brainwashed this society, and we're no different. The U.S. is, in particular, dominates the top 10 media outlets in the world.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, we have, yes, we live in this society in which we're saturated with so-called information. It isn't information, it's media. We're saturated, we live in a media society, and we get the media repetitively saying the same thing over and again. The news is a grotesque parody of itself, where the news becomes simply an echo chamber. We get what the great British filmmaker Peter Watkins, the man who made the war game, what he called the monoform. That is a form of cut repetition, so that we can't really contextualize anything. We're prevented from really understanding anything. We're prevented from really knowing anything. Now, I hope that doesn't sound an exaggeration, because it isn't. Next time you look at the news, have a look at the way your mind is engaged, and in that brief period, the kind of information you are given. Now, that happens everywhere. It happens on the television. It happens on your mobile phone. It happens on the internet. The wonderful thing, of course, about the internet is that it does offer us alternatives, such as your program, Randy, and many others. But whether the majority of people have the time, the energy to navigate through the internet to find these alternatives is very unlikely. I don't know. The majority are exposed to this monoform. That's not information. That is saying the same thing over and over again. And if you've ever waited on the telephone listening to the prompts, that's what it's like. That's what our news is like.
in fact, you said that in that somebody else said it in The War You Don't See, that the 24-hour news format is the worst because it keeps, ingraining over and over the same story. And getting back to what you said earlier, that we don't get this information, that the public is it is the submissive void. You talk about over the last since you've been alive, you say U.S. has overthrown or tried to overthrow 50 governments. They've interfered in 30 elections, dropped bombs on 30 countries, and U.S. has attempted to murder 50 leaders. Now, how many Americans know about that, and how many news outlets are telling us about that?
Well, as you're having Thanksgiving Day, here's something to remember that I've just read just before you came on, something from a very good site, one of the sites I would recommend that people go to, called Responsible Statecraft. It's not at all radical. They just publish alternative views. And they've published a report from the Journal of Conflict Resolution that shows that the United States, since it was born, since the beginning, has conducted 400 military interventions across the world. The majority of those have been from 1950 until the present day. So there are any number of figures that can be that are available, that can be used. But the truth,
Dominican Republic in the 60s. I'm going back to Nicaragua. We were there. Smedley Butler talked about going into Guatemala, in Mexico at the turn of the into the 20th century, all over, and expand. I think it's an invasion too, expanding westward with Manifest Destiny. That was an invasion, and going into Hawaii, and it just doesn't stop. Now, I did want you to talk about, after this was over, you asked Harold Pinter, and you actually you point out two of his speeches from 2008. Tell us a little bit about your friendship with Harold Pinter and the nature of those speeches that you cited in this article.
Well, I first met Harold Pinter when he was supporting the Sandinistas. And he spoke, I heard him speak at a meeting in London in support of the Sandinista government, which was then under constant attack from the so-called Contras, which were funded by the Reagan government and by a whole lot of dark forces connected with the Reagan government. And they, again, this wasn't a particularly radical government, but it was one that offered the first hope in that region of Central America since, and you mentioned the overthrow of Guatemala, since the overthrow of the democratically elected president of Guatemala, Jacob Arbenz, in 1954, the US, if you read, say, Greg Grandin's wonderful book about Latin America, you get then a sense that this violence towards the rest of the world, I mean, we call it empire and imperial and everything, but it is it's like a homicidal violence towards countries that try to go their own way. The great crime in the eyes of so many elites in the United States has been independence. So I'm sorry I went off from Harold Pinter. No. Harold Pinter had an acute sense of justice, and deployed his extraordinary command of the English language in defense of it. And we would meet regularly. We used to have our what we call our Wednesday lunch, in which we try to put the world right And I'd listened to this formidable voice of Harold Pinter describing the injustices, and this descriptions were distilled into an eloquent speech, which he gave when he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2005, and which he said that we know of all the world's crimes, the Russia's crimes, China's crimes, whoever the current smaller enemies are, their crimes, Saddam Hussein and all the rest of it. But our own crimes, that is, the majority of which these days are the crimes directed by the United States, we know very little about.
Right.
And that in a great burst of sardonic Pinter, he described this as an extraordinary achievement, even a witty achievement by the United States, that it could bury our language and our knowledge so successfully that we knew so little. So there you have the submissive voice. There was one lunch I discussed Lenny Rochenstahl's submissive voice with Harold Pinter. He says, everywhere we have a submissive voice all the time. I said, how can you? I asked the question you have. I said, how can you? You've got the television going, you can get what you want on your phone. Well, he said, that simply reinforces, shores up the submissive voice because of this mind-deadening repetition.
He called it a hypnosis, and according to your book, and he said this about the U.S. He says the crimes of the U.S. have been systematic, constant, vicious, and remorseless, and that's in that speech that he gave back in 2008, and I guess you were there. But you did ask him about the hypnosis. Was that the submissive voice? And he said, yes, it was. So
yeah. Yes. He, I don't think anyone, not in my lifetime, has bettered a speech that crystallized the kind of major threat that we live with day after day and have with certainly during my lifetime, and which we don't recognize.
Right.
Which we don't. Yes, some of us do, of course, but in which the majority and those institutions that speak for the majority, the major news organizations, the political institutions, they don't recognize it either.
We're talking with John Pilger, author, filmmaker, journalist, war correspondent, and we're talking about this article, which I said, everything I want to talk about today is in this article from September 6th. And I want to move on to this, where you said, in our system of corporate democracy, war is a necessity. War is a necessity. And so can you since 9/11, you talk about since 9/11, it's really amped up. So why is no war a necessity for our corporate democracies?
Well, because
it's a rhetorical question.
Major industry in the United States would grind to a halt without war. War is essential. The major armaments industries, from Lockheed to Raytheon, all the rest. Most of them are situated in the United States, one or two of them elsewhere in Britain and in France, and certainly Russia has a thriving war industry. But the major war industry that really encourages all the others is in the US, and the US economy is based on that. Something like almost half of real tax dollars end up directly or indirectly feeding this war economy. If you go down to Los Alamos in New Mexico, where they are quietly, secretly building new plutonium pits and about to start on a program of new, quote, usable nuclear weapons, the cost of which is beyond accounting. It doesn't have to be accounted, but Congress passes over it. The amount of money actually spent on the development of nuclear weapons in the United States is not known. Yes, there are figures, but Barack Obama, who of course was given the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in banning, he hoped, or calling on the world to ban nuclear weapons, was the most vociferous in encouraging industries like that in Los Alamos to build more and more nuclear weapons, to which over the next decade or so, I've read somewhere, I don't know, it's absolutely correct, the word trillions of dollars will be devoted. So in answer to your question, that's why there is an accountable economy in the United States. Then there is an economy, subterranean economy, and much of that depends on the arms industry. So, and the US is an imperial, 19th century imperial nation. It controls the world trade in food grains. Its biggest companies, like Cargill, are dominant in something as essential as food grains. It has a strategic and military presence at the gateway to fossil fuels right throughout the world. Most of the countries that were overthrown for several reasons, but usually the connection, it wasn't that irrational. The connection had something to do with control of resources, control of strategic position. And that's been true of the US since the beginning.
Yes, and so you continue talking about this as a necessity. You bring up, that's why we have forever wars. You bring up Iraq. We're still there. They say we're not there. We've been there since 2003. Afghanistan, after 20 years, we have a forever war there. Libya, we spent a lot of time. There was a lot of money spent there in Libya, and all based on pretext and lies. Every single one of those wars were based on pretext, so there was no reason to go into Afghanistan. They didn't attack us. They did not attack us, but we went in there for 20 years.
Well, Afghanistan played a very important part in the US's largely successful campaign to help bring down the Soviet Union. The US went a long way with helping to create the Mujahideen, which saw off the Soviet Union when it invaded. It invaded in 1979 the Afghanistan. Then when the US invaded Afghanistan, directly invaded, that is, in 2001, the cover story, of course, had some nonsense about Osama bin Laden being there. In fact, the Taliban were desperate to give up Osama bin Laden, put him on trial, and not have a lot to do with him. But we knew very little about that. It had nothing to do with 9/11, really. It was about using 9/11 to gain the enormous strategic position, they thought, of Afghanistan, which of course is right next to the Soviet Union and right next to Russia and next to Pakistan and other countries. Last year, there was this familiar sight of people of a country being of the United States and its allies pulling out of a country. This was followed by Joe Biden freezing $7 billion worth of Afghanistan-owned revenue, which happened to be in American banks, and distributing it. He apparently gave half, he said, to the 9/11 survivors. I'm not sure that happened. And the other half he kept. So he stole it. And Afghanistan is a country where people are being forced to sell children in order to buy food. 97% of the country is suffering deep impoverishment, and it has been now, you know, that follows a pattern. Iraq is the disaster. Iraq oil was stolen by foreign, mainly American oil companies. Libya, which was a modern state under Gaddafi, with basic benefits for its people, now is a source of desperate migration to Europe. The people in small boats you see trying to cross the Mediterranean and the English Channel, and a certain amount of terrorism as well. Terror groups, ISIS, took root in the post-2011, the post-Gaddafi, the post-US, basically directed US, French, British, various other Europeans are involved, invasion and devastation of a modern state in Libya. So those are the three. Randy, we'd be here all day and night.
Right. No, I know that. I want to get.
But there you have it. All this information, of course, is readily available, but you will not hear it or any suggestion of it on the so-called news.
Right. That's for sure. That's for sure. You know, so you got these forever wars. It almost seems like these are 10-year plans. Wars are a 10-year, like they're planning for the future. Projects like like right now with Ukraine, and you get into that after you talk about all these other conflicts in this gigantic, wonderful, epic article that you wrote on September 8th, and you talk about this summit meeting on for people who don't know about it, this summit meeting back in June, a NATO summit regarding Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Ukraine, Ukraine is very important because it's a major war and it's close to the ultimate prize, or perhaps not the ultimate. China, I suppose, the subjugation of China, of returning China to its previous state. Is probably the ultimate prize, but certainly nearly sharing that accolade is breaking up the Russian Federation. And really, that's what the NATO war in Ukraine is about. I don't think Mr. Putin should have actually invaded Ukraine. I think it was a bad decision. All wars get out of control they kill innocent people. It shouldn't have happened. But for those of us on the other side, in the West, throw our hands in the air and say we don't understand or that it was unprovoked, it's just nonsense. It was totally provoked. And Ukraine is a kind of the West's Frankenstein. It's been building this state that has an ethnic division, well, like many states, but something like a third of Ukraine is Russian speaking. It's in the south and the east. People who were attacked by the various Ukrainian regimes supported by the United States. And of course, in 2014, the United States managed a very volatile situation that produced a coup against the democratically elected president of Ukraine. And really, that's when the war in Ukraine began in 2014. But those are, thanks to this extraordinary media we have, those views are now considered subversive, anathema to all reasonable, polite people, and are condemned. There is virtually no contextualizing, no attempt to explain, to understand what this extremely dangerous war effectively between NATO, US-run NATO, and Russia is all about. And it is about some very extreme people in the United States doing as they intended to do and planned to do back in the 90s, and that is pushing the American so-called strategy up to the borders of Russia and destabilizing that country. And, you know, one only has to, of course, reverse everything, Randy. You know that. You reverse it. If you had the same situation on the borders of Mexico or border with Canada, it will be intolerable. It wouldn't happen. But that's different.
You know, the media here has just been atrocious. It's all gaslighting. I can't. You got to read this article. I mean, there are other articles out there. We know people who write about it. Scott Ritter writes about it. Max Blumenthal writes about it, and others. You've written about it extensively. If you read the media reports right now, and these keep popping up on my cell phone, you would think that the Ukrainian army has pushed the Russian army past Stalingrad. You know what I mean? The same way you would hear in 43, Goebbels saying, even though they were getting their asses kicked, that we've won in Stalingrad. That's the kind of information that you get here, trying to prop up this state, which it really is. And you pointed out, Stepan Bandera is like a big hero with this Azov battalion. They don't tell you about that. You say it's airbrushed carefully. They're trying to eradicate the Stepan Bandera connection with the Azov battalion and their past history. With that, in World War II, they did killed hundreds of thousands of Jews and Poles. And that's where we start, or the U.S. started, or not the U.S., I'm sorry, where the Germans, Freudian slip, started Operation Barbarossa, was out of Ukraine.
Yeah. Randy, we haven't got time to do the whole.
Yes, I know. We got just a few minutes.
I don't think believing. The problem is if you cheer for one side, you have to then believe some false information, because propaganda does come from both sides. And my point is that we are not allowed to judge that for ourselves. We are given one side. We are given a kind of tsunami of propaganda, of jingoistic propaganda that comes from one side, and as you mentioned, is full of lies. That doesn't say that the other side is not going to give us something similar, but we're not in a position, we should be, to be able to make a judgment ourselves. So my advice to people always is trust nothing unless it is independently sourced. And also to spend the time, take the time to navigate through the net. There are some very reliable sources within the net. There's some very unreliable sources there too, which might bring you close to an understanding of what is happening in terribly complex and dangerous situations like Ukraine.
Folks, you got to read this article by John Pilger. It's right on the front page of his website, johnpilger.com. Also, there are 61 films which are ensconced in the British Library. John, I'm going to keep it to the time that I promised here. What I'm going to do is we're going to bring on Afshin Rattansi, but I want to bring him to say hello to you, and then we'll go to a break. Can we get Afshin in for 1 second? So,
hey, John, how's it going? And Randy.
Nice to see you.
Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, well, I shall let us speak soon. We've thought about.
I mean, I suppose everyone is dying to hear whether you've been in touch with Julian Assange at all while you're in London at the moment. I suppose the whole world wants to know that.
Yeah, I have.
We'll let you talk about that on your show, which is coming out next week. I wanted you guys to say hello. I love it when you interview John. And I want to thank you, John. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to play some Shostakovich before it's banned in this country. And we'll be right back with the great. Thank you very much, John. John Pilger, the very best. All right, we'll be right back with Afshin Rattansi.
Okay, bye.
That was not Shostakovich. I think maybe it's been banned from this show at this point. That was Humoresque, all right, by Dvorak. Is it by Dvorak or is it by Brahms? I'm Randy Critical live on the fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City and on the Progressive Radio Network in New York City as well. And we are on the website. We have a website. It's AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com. And you can catch all of our programs there or at live on the fly on YouTube and on Odyssey. Joining me from the other side of the planet is the astute investigative journalist, award-winning investigative journalist, and author, Mr. Afshin Rattansi. I've never seen you look so good. The break has.
It must be the lights. Amazing talk with John there, Randy. I mean, he's so modest. You don't really realize quite how courageous he has been in a lifetime of reporting, do you? I mean, he doesn't necessarily come through. And you got to remember, this is a guy, Pilger, who he was a tabloid journalist. I mean, his stuff went out to tens of millions of people in the Daily Mirror in Britain. He had a column on The Guardian at one point. And as all those different outlets didn't like what he was saying, the truth, he didn't seem to mind so much that he was, in effect, being persecuted. And, of course, persecuted for a lifetime of defending the persecuted and the voiceless, most notably now, of course, of late, in the past few years, in his defense of his friend, his close friend, the founder of WikiLeaks. So it's always amazing to hear him.
Yeah, it really is. And we didn't even talk about, I read that column that I was talking about. There, and I took a million notes. I got to the second page, so I never. That's it. You know what I mean? So I knew it was wishful thinking that I was going to get into the war you don't see, which we're going to play on the second hour here on WBAI. You're not gonna see it because that's the second hour. This is the hour that we're going to have on our show on the internet. But the second hour, I'm doing live tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm doing live. By the way, I am doing this on Thanksgiving. What a wonderful day it is. Do you celebrate Thanksgiving or Washington?
Well, happy Thanksgiving. I mean, whatever you do, Randy, on Thanksgiving, don't give some infected blanket to a real American, a Native American. I mean, that's my only piece of advice, really.
That was
I think more, in fairness, more Americans know now, and more Americans north of the Rio Grande of America know what Thanksgiving actually means.
Do you think they know? More people.
Well, I would hope so.
Has
Disney not made a cartoon?
What could be worse than Columbus Day, celebrating a guy who committed mass murder? You know, he was the Stephen Bandera of his time, right?
Yeah, but that calls to mind, actually, something I was appearing on TV just today. It's all your fault. It's not the British fault, you know. There was a British report today. You were talking about Afghanistan with John Pilger, and the British official report said the UK was aware of the problems in the design of sending billions of dollars of cash to Afghanistan. But, quote, the UK's determination to provide unconditional support to the United States meant there was no attempt to reconsider the approach. So whatever it is, even the official reports of the British say, it's all your fault. You can't blame Britain.
It's all my fault. It's all our fault. All right. Afshin Rattansi, first of all, I am so glad that you are going to be back on the air. How long has it been since Going Underground was on the air? How long? 6 months?
Well, our last show was in February, I think it was. I think we had a couple of weeks before the fact that we don't have a First Amendment in the United Kingdom became more tangible to me personally and the team that makes Going Underground than it has ever been. Over the 10 years the program had been produced in London, we were obviously aware of the fact that journalist after journalist was being suppressed, that freedom of expression was being repressed. Emblematic was, of course, this figure of the founder of WikiLeaks being, I know you've had Niels Meltzer on from the United Nations before yourself. Most emblematic is, of course, Julian Assange, Niels Meltzer, the UN Special Rapporteur, considered to be tortured by not only the British authorities, but the British media. We knew this was happening, but we assumed that, I don't think we quite realized this was ever going to happen, because we were interviewing MPs, members of Parliament, who are now in senior positions in the British Parliament. None of them stood up to say freedom of expression, freedom of the press should be defended. It's been a terrible, terrible epiphany for members of the team at Going Underground, and we could escape. I could have escaped to a country with the First Amendment, the United States, but they charged too much for basing myself there from Britain. So I didn't go to the US, so I came to the heart of the Middle East, which is the subject of so much propaganda in NATO nation media.
Let me ask you that. Do people that you know on the other side of the pond and throughout Europe actually think that we have a real serious First Amendment here? That journalists are...
No, well, you clearly do have a First Amendment in the United States, because I could produce Going Underground in the United States. As I'm sure at your frequent Washington press conferences of your governing class, when they give them, they'd say, what are you talking about? There is freedom here. I know that censorship works in multivarious and multifactorial ways in your country, so that huge conglomerates control what 95% of the airways is, obviously. But there is a First Amendment. You can't say that about Britain, where they can ban people who make television programs. They can ban journalists. They can sack the Director General of the BBC twice in my lifetime on national security issue reporting, whether it be WMD to Iraq or U.S. spy satellites and U.S. bases. They can torture journalists, and they can, well, some have it, kill journalists with impunity. I mean. You know, in the United States, do they really?
Qualitative difference there, but I think that we have a very anemic First Amendment. Yes, I can do this right here. I can say it, but as long as people aren't listening, if I had a platform that reached 40 million people in the U.S., would I be able to get away with this kind of free speech?
Tucker Carlson seems to occasionally. Obviously, right. Tucker Carlson has a variety of different views. But
I stand corrected. You're right. All right, so it's better, but
although I have to say, in regards to Fox News's Tucker Carlson, I think he himself admitted, and if you watch Fox, the Murdoch Fox station, you'll see there's lots of wonderful advertising for the rest of the programs. When Tucker Carlson, the most popular, as I understand it, cable news presenter on American television, appears, no one seems to want to advertise. Companies don't like it, so there's something there to be seen.
Well, I'm trying to get a donation from the Atlantic Council. I just can't seem to.
Yeah,
we're talking.
Trying to get one from. I'm sure the Gates Foundation. Maybe they'd like it. Wouldn't they like you?
Yeah, I think I was talking to somebody yesterday. The 4 dullest people in the world are the 4 richest. Bezos is a very dull guy. Gates is a very dull guy. Zuckerberg is a very boring guy, dull. And so is Elon Musk. These are dull people. If they didn't have $1 in their pocket, no one would talk to them. Do you find them interesting outside of the fact?
Everyone seems to think, Gates obviously is hugely compromised by alleged scandals in the developing world. Jeff Bezos, Washington Post, they worked with WikiLeaks. Why is he not on how many days he's been incarcerated on the front page of his newspaper, the Washington Post, every day? I don't understand that. Facebook, what they found out to be working with the intelligence services directly. So I think, in that sense, all of those guys are very interesting. Elon Musk, he's endlessly promoted by elements of the libertarian right. So, he unbanned your ex-president Trump, so there was something about free speech, and then wouldn't allow Alex Jones to be unbanned. So maybe he doesn't quite understand free speech.
He banned Scott Ritter again for this after he took over. Scott Ritter got back on, and then he's banned. And then yesterday, Garland Nixon.
Well, he works with the intelligence services too, doesn't he? Elon Musk's companies. Do as well. So, there are personas, there are public relations and marketing personas, and then there's the real person. I'm surprised that he banned Scott Ritter for the second time.
Yeah, second time. He's.
What was he talking about? What got him banned this time?
I think that region in Ukraine where the Ukrainians committed the massacre and not the Russians. What was it, Boka? What's it called? There's a region there where he blamed it twice now on the Ukrainians and not the Russians. And they said, all right, we're taking you off for that. Bucha? Is it Bucha?
Wait, but isn't Elon Musk must have banned Associated Press for printing the fake news that the missile that hit Poland, killing 2 Polish farmers in their 60s, was Russian, according to the Associated Press, and it turned out to be the Ukrainians with NATO armor. I'm sure Associated Press has folded in the United States now, right?
I saw that post of you on the television show talking about it, that we were that close to possibly World War III, a nuclear nightmare based on the disinformation. Did they deliberately do that, AP, or they just didn't check their sources, or were they just too eager to put some negative stuff out there about the Russians?
Good old Noam Chomsky is always the first one to look at, isn't it, when media do something so crass, and one has to realize there are structures here. I understand they fired the young journalist who pressed the enter key or whatever it is that AP do to send information or propaganda around the world. Isn't that funny? It's always the lowest person that gets done for it, when of course he must have been operating within a structure and a context in the newsroom that he worked in, which would have said, think of Russians as Nazis. Think that Russia were, the topsy-turvy world in which Western news reporters and so-called journalists work. Their entire worldview is so subverted by Antony Blinken's State Department propaganda. It could well have been just a natural mistake, just as CNN Turk made the mistake, as Bloomberg made the mistake. Kudos to Reuters, which I think you can Google it. There is a Reuters story about how they worked closely with the British and American intelligence agencies and were cutouts of them, as if to say they aren't today. But at least Reuters, they suddenly went, hang on a minute, we better not put this out. And so they won that battle with their rival AP. But more often than not, of course, it is a structure of incompetence and propaganda and servile behavior rather than Antony Blinken or the West Exec Corporation, where Blinken presided over, calling up Associated Press and say, start World War III, say it was the Russians that launched a missile at NATO member Poland.
Stop right there. I'm going to come right back with you. I have some more questions for you, but I'm going to say goodbye to some of our New York listeners. We're now going to play Shostakovich. This is, I believe, a suite, variation, something by Shostakovich. And we'll be right back with the great Afshin Rattansi. Okay, that is Dmitry Shostakovich. I'm Randy Credico, Randy Credico, live on the fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom here in New York City, WBAI, Progressive Radio Network. We are going to continue this discussion with Afshin Rattansi, the host of the returning. Is it called Going Underground when you return?
No, we thought we call it Zelensky Television, because it's completely different now. We got a lot of money from Antony Blinken in cash, and no, of course it's going to be called Going Underground.
And sense of humor. I love your sense of
humor. Yeah, no, but the difference is that Going Underground couldn't be made as a television program in London under British press restrictions. So whilst we could have chosen the United States, it would have been difficult in France and Germany because there are lots of restrictions across Europe, which also has curbs on freedom of the press and freedom of expression. It was clearly the global South that embraced us. And, we thought about Vietnam, about China, countries in Africa, in Latin America. And ultimately, because of this phrase, the multipolar world, we thought Dubai and the UAE would be a good place. I'd been here before because I helped set up the Dubai Business Channel in the late 90s. And hopefully this is our new home, and we've got a degree of freedom. Every country you go to has different ideas of freedom, as you know. But here in Dubai, we're hoping that we can say things that we couldn't in Britain when it comes to the so-called, how they see it, cradle of democracy, Europe.
Yeah. What's in store? What would be some of the stories that you will be covering? Obviously, what's happening in Ukraine. I asked John a few questions. We barely scratched the surface of Ukraine, and this Stepan Bandera. Do you know who this guy is?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that he was being saluted and streets named after him since the war began in Ukraine in 2014 and slightly earlier is obviously a shame across Europe, in the sense that some might see it as a celebration of the Holocaust and the deaths of tens of millions of people who fought Nazism in World War II. So, when it comes to Ukraine, you were talking to John, and I was alluding to his courage earlier. John is in London at the moment, so he too is under press restrictions of a kind, as is everyone. And I think everyone is aware of it in Western Europe, that they have to be careful. Even elected members of parliament in European capitals would be aware of that. Ironically, of course, it's been the right, and often the libertarian right, who see freedom of speech as axiomatic, who you'd think the left would as well, but members of the right that say, hang on, maybe there are two sides to this story, and the least we can do is to at least be given both sides of this story so that people can judge and therefore vote in or out politicians. Otherwise, of course, there is no democracy in Britain, and there is no democracy in Europe.
Well, speaking of the right and the left on this, here, and I can't even call the Democrats left. They're not, they're centrist. Seriously. But you
the Democrats left. I would call the Democrats far-right extremists.
Yes,
if they're clearly supporting they're clearly supporting people who support Stepan Bandera.
Yes, I had Scott Ritter on last week, and he's on the hit list. So is our good friend Roger Waters is on that hit list. That Azov Battalion. I don't know who files the hit list, but we were talking last week. He says, "Yeah, of course, I'm fearful up there by where I live, within 20 miles, a little city called Ellenville, and they have statues of Stepan Bandera and other collaborators, Ukrainian collaborators with the Nazis. There are statues there, and there are kids that come out in this park. It's a camp, a Ukrainian camp for kids. They come in, they celebrate, and they salute these guys. So it's like just 45 miles away from the state capitol that you have this here, and nobody talks about it. Scott and I did. You don't see it in any newspaper." But getting back,
you'd think. This at least puts to bed any ideas of a Jewish conspiracy, because presumably the Jewish communities in the East Coast are outraged by this. You'd think so many decades after they were not allowed, if you were Jewish, to be a member of a golf club in the East Coast, you'd think that there would be people from all minorities, let alone WASPs in the East, saying you can't have a monument to Stepan Bandera, who helped facilitate the mass murder of Jews in the United States as a big. But then again, you did say Thanksgiving is celebrated, and so is Christopher Columbus.
And we celebrate Washington's birthday, who had 1,000 slaves, and refused to set them free upon his death. But getting back to the Republicans and the Democrats, you take a look, because you say there are people in the UK that are conservative, that are more open to free speech than the Labour Party. Down in D.C., where I've been for 4 months, riding on a fucking truck and breaking my butt and my left leg, you got two scholars, constitutional scholars. You know who they are. One of them is Gerald Nadler, and the other one is, I can't think of his name, but who are constitutional scholars who do not support, won't come out in support of Assange. Whereas you have Republicans, or one guy in particular, Massey from Kentucky, and Rand Paul, who support Assange. So what's wrong with that picture?
Well, clearly they haven't... FDR is a complicated character, and FDR is the great hero, isn't he, of the U.S. Democrats? And I think if you looked into his career, you would see strange goings on when it came to freedom of the press. The libertarian right have a charming and lovely, if sometimes simple, attitude towards what world we want to create. Because hand in hand with the libertarian belief in a free press is, of course, the belief in a Hayekian race as regards how society works with no welfare state. Right. So it is quite complicated there. Right. They don't seem to realize that, of course, if you have a free press and then you have a hierarchy in state, you're going to have conglomerates of media companies, which will soon completely dominate what it goes for being a free press. But let that go to one side. And yes, we have to applaud those on the libertarian right for defending freedom in a way that nothing appears to exist in the tiny minds of this Democrat Party, the slave party in Congress.
Jamie Raskin, by the way, I didn't have to look that up. Jamie Raskin, who I know, is a constitutional scholar from, I think, George Washington University or American University. And they won't go near Assange. They won't go near Assange. Now, because I didn't talk to John about Assange, and this is called Assange Countdown to Freedom, so I got to talk to you about it, about Assange. I even have, if you can see it, I've got a new backdrop there. It's been 12 years since he entered the embassy, and 4 years come April 11th that he was ensconced in this ground floor version of the Tower of London there at Belmarsh with such rancid conditions. And we're going into a cold season right now. And I think you brought that up to me last night. Is this really, this is my conclusion, a fight not with Merrick Garland. It's not a fight with Biden. This is a fight with the state within the state, the CIA. This is a CIA prosecution. Would you concur with that?
Well, it's clearly Virginia he's going to be headed for. We don't, both of us, and I know you talk a lot about infamous lawyer heroes of yours. We don't understand the law as well as to be barristers in these courtrooms in Britain where, according to John and you who've been there in the court, have witnessed the most bizarre excuse for justice. Presumably that you've seen for a while with him in a glass box and all the rest. Yeah, it looks like that, doesn't it? And then when people draw the connections between people in the British judiciary and big tech, big intelligence, the security state, Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the so-called Labour Party, you do see a terrible suspicion, especially amongst his supporters, Julian Assange's supporters. How can he not have been? I mean, on one of the cases, I don't know whether it's the one when you were in the courtroom, bail wasn't asked for by his lawyers. Probably that was a good decision. We don't know. They were strategically planning. But whatever it is, as you say, he's in jail in the cold in November in the highest security prison awaiting deportation to a set-piece espionage court in Virginia. Could none of these lawyers... Are the CIA too strong in Britain?
Yeah, I think so. Well, you got the CIA and their counterparts there, the MI6 and the GCHQ, that raided offices after The Guardian. Was it The Guardian published some of Assange's work, and after they had won some awards, and then they raided the offices. It is quite disturbing, and it is scary. The prospect of the CIA outside the embassy, they were there, or at least agents of the CIA. I mean, there were assassination spots. They want this man dead. They don't want him talking. And tell me why. Is it revenge, or do they have something else that he may know that they don't want to be brought out in public?
I mean, I'm sure he has other things that he wants to say that he already knows. I saw Chelsea Manning has been appearing on. They go for her because she is trans. Perhaps their identity politics allows that. She's written what I'm reading at the moment, a beautiful book about her life, and she said if Julian Assange hadn't done it, I would have published it. Standing up for things after people have been saying that she was slightly wavering in her support for WikiLeaks. She definitely seems to be supporting WikiLeaks up to where I've read at the moment. So Julian Assange, yeah, he probably does have something. But of course, the main reason for the persecution and some call it crucifixion of Julian Assange is to make him a lesson to anyone who wants to fight against the U.S. military-industrial complex through journalism, and to tell all journalists everywhere, this is what we'll do to you if you go against what we are telling you to write about global politics, about the environment, about killing, mass killing, about from currencies. I mean, you look at the spectrum of what WikiLeaks revealed about sanctions policy, about medicine, about pharmaceuticals, everything that is life on Earth. And this is what we will do to you if you depart from the status quo.
Every week for the last, I guess, 40 weeks, I make it a point to play an excerpt from why supposedly it's for this, but I think it's a CIA. But this is what angered the Defense Department and other war hawks, and that's the collateral damage. I play it every week. I want people out there who haven't seen it to see it.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse, we have individuals going to the scene. Looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons. Let me engage you.
Hey, we need to stop that. We get down there. We need to straight south. You see my location?
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1A, request permission to engage individual. Picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1A. We're taking him. Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1A.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1A, engage. Clear. Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
How sick do you get when you see that?
I was just trying to look up the names because, you know, the names of those people being shot dead. You'd think that Reuters would do more for Julian Assange, given the fact that only is it because of WikiLeaks that we know how their cameraman died. What does it say about Reuters that they don't every day flag up how many days he's been incarcerated in Britain or seeking asylum? That's the job of Reuters, isn't it? Given that their employee was killed that day and the lies and cover up that was dealt to their employee afterwards.
They have filed no, notice to the government here to get answers. Nothing. They've just let it go. Reuters, have they done?
They should be covering your show every day, shouldn't they? Because you're the one standing up for him.
Right. Well, I'm standing up for the Reuters, yes, and their reporters, and sometimes they do good work. Reuters, all things considered, as opposed to MSNBC or the New York Times. Occasionally, they get it right. Not here.
No, I mean, not that I've seen much sign of that over the years, being as a journalist. And Reuters, as I said, themselves conceded that they were a front and a cutout for the intelligence agencies of the United States and Britain. And, I don't think one can necessarily trust them. Or, as John Pilger was saying earlier, you can trust anyone fully that much. I mean, look at WBAI, where you do this show. They carry Democracy Now!, the great Amy Goodman's program, which clearly acted as a stenographer for lies on Syria, as a stenographer for lies on Ukraine, they've lied about so much in effect.
I have nothing to do with them. I was on the show a few times when I ran for governor back in 2000.
Amy Goodman was on our show. Amy Goodman was on Going Underground.
I understand.
I used to love that show. They did great work.
Yeah, but she also sandbagged, along with Alan Nair and Julian Assange, back in March of 2017, basically blaming them for Trump's victory and perpetuating the lie that Roger Stone was a back channel to WikiLeaks and he was involved in Russiagate. They popped that on him. They brought in Alan Nairn, and so he thought it was just Amy, and it became a belligerent interview. And that night he called me and he said, I got to do your show tomorrow. So he was on my show the following day or a couple of days later. And but if you take a look at that interview by Amy Goodman, and you are right. She has done a lot of shameful stuff. She's at my station right now. I have nothing to do with it. And there are other programs there I have nothing to do with.
Give her my love. You know, she's great. And of course, that put you in the limelight, extended the propaganda against you. And there you were on CNN because, of course, you were the man. You were the conduit for all of this with Roger Stone. I mean, the fact, I mean, you know, journalists make errors and mistakes all the time. But this one is so glaring. It's a bit like, you know, we thought we'd made an error on going underground when we let Rudy Giuliani be on our U.S. Election Day special, and he started talking about Hunter Biden's laptop. And frankly, we couldn't verify that as we were doing the interview. And we were thinking we were making a mistake about the existence of a laptop that he dared show us the screen of, which we had to censor. There's us censoring, not because of any political reasons, but in case children were watching, clearly, because there was narcotics being imbibed and so on. You know, the fact that Democracy Now! Can't tell the truth when, you know, Cy Hirsch explained the chemical weapons of Syria attack. Oh no, Democracy Now! Is all up for it, up for war with Assad. And of course, for them, the big story is always Trump. They don't really seem to understand that history, all of human history, is a story of structural power and class, and not of one orange-faced man who has a big house in Florida.
Right. Well, she's a great business woman. I will say that. I wanted. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to bring in this because we showed the collateral damage tape, but I and others, absolutely. Chris Hedges last week, John will say, I think said that to me earlier today, that it's really the CIA, and it all started after Vault 7. And here is Pompeo. This is when it really heated up. Pompeo comes out with a pack of lies.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia. We know this because Assange and his ilk make common cause with dictators today. Yes, they try unsuccessfully to cloak themselves and their actions in the language of liberty and privacy, but in reality, they champion nothing but their own celebrity. Their currency is clickbait, their moral compass non-existent, their mission personal self-aggrandizement through destruction of Western values.
I mean, he couldn't ad-lib that. He had to read that poorly written. He couldn't ad-lib that off. I mean, really, off the top of your head, you could have said the same thing. It wouldn't have been too.
Yeah, but you could swap the name. If you just swap the name WikiLeaks, you could easily instead and more accurately, arguably, put the word, I don't know, CNN, BBC.
Yeah, right.
All of those, they're acting on behalf and have done for dictators. I remember in the 1980s doing documentaries against Saddam Hussein when the BBC was de facto celebrating Saddam Hussein as a Western ally. I remember vividly how they celebrated the, in effect, dictators and hostile actors that were the Mujahideen that they were then so quick to then admit, destroyed the World Trade Center in New York, kind of.
Right. Well, so I think it is because of that they're really intent on silencing Julian Assange, the CIA, and after that began this intensive spying on Assange and looking for ways. You've seen. You know, I know Michael Isikoff and Max Blumenthal, you've all talked about the spying that took place right after that Vault 7 was released. So in my mind, I think this is a battle, a difficult battle. It's beyond a Sisyphean battle. It is like carrying 2 boulders over that hill. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, because of course, when I was in the embassy doing all those interviews, it was just before Vault 7, I think. So thankfully, I evaded all the CCTV, as far as I know, that was illegally spying on confidential talking between Assange and his own lawyers, which you'd think would automatically mean that his lawyers in London could throw out all cases against him, because that's illegal and no case can pursue. But then where is Vault 8? Of course. Maybe you have it, Randy. I'm not sure. But clearly, the CIA do get angry. You got Vault 8 behind you. You're going to release it slowly over Thanksgiving holiday.
Yes, right from Thanksgiving through Columbus Day, one page at a time. What has happened to the WikiLeaks website, by the way?
I mean, that's very disturbing, because every journalist should be using it. I used to shout in my newsrooms always, look it up there first, any story, just as a check that you're not missing something, because it wasn't then disseminated really in a kind of full way. And if there's a criticism I have of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, it is, of course, that he partnered with organizations like The Guardian, where I first started my journalism career, but, you know, it ended. So he should have known The Guardian is not a trustworthy publication, nor is the Washington Post or Der Spiegel or any of the others that WikiLeaks partnered with. So, you know, he should have known that.
Right. Do you think that stuff is all backed up somewhere?
Well, all the stuff on the website is luckily mirrored in the Web Time Machine site. So there are mirrors of it. And I think the article that was written recently obviously by a tech person, complaining that the website has just deteriorated. You do a search, it sometimes doesn't work. I'm talking about wikileaks.org. Sometimes you are led to a page and you get a 404 error. It is mirrored in other places, so you can get access to the WikiLeaks cables that you need to if you're a journalist in a newsroom covering some country that hasn't been in the news lately for some time and need to see exactly how U.S. tax dollars, U.S. public money has been used to usually contaminate, destroy, annihilate any scintilla of democratic values in that country. At the behest of the United States government or elements within U.S. power.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better. That's going to be a clip that we're going to put on when I promote this show. I want to, before you go, I saw you on Instagram talking about deals that have been made that have evaded the sanctions, which I was not aware of. I don't get this information over here. That Iran is selling gas, that they're able to survive, that the global South is kind of mobilized. Can you kind of repeat what I heard from you yesterday?
Well, I think the point I was making on television the other day was really about how the sanctions, the self-sanctioning, of course, of the European Union and Britain has been terrible for the most vulnerable in that region, a declining region. I think everyone in Wall Street would agree. And the United States is playing an economic game for its elites, which arguably one could see as strategically well played. They are desperate to sell fossil fuels to the Europeans. They didn't want Russia to exert hegemonic power. That's happening. So all this is happening between these declining areas of the United States and Europe, whilst, of course, the global South, which is not really reported on, except when it comes to not adhering by certain identity politics norms. I think it was the great George Galloway, former member of parliament, saying the other day that, LGBTQ rights are not respected across Africa or the Middle East, therefore no sporting occasion should ever occur there. Identity politics being the sole vestige of what was once emancipatory politics and the left in Europe and the United States, that's all that's left. The global South, meanwhile, are forging huge alliances in which they don't demand of each other, the countries, that they change and mirror their values. Whilst, of course, you and I, Randy, would love to see egalitarianism in all its forms and the respect for all minority communities and all other communities, whatever communities. These different nation states with all the different histories are starting to deal with each other in ways that could only be the stuff of the worst nightmares in NATO headquarters, the European Union Parliament, and the British Parliament. They're working it out. As Beijing so often says, we don't really care what your country or that country does. We want to trade with you and want mutual prosperity. And of course, from a Marxist perspective, that prosperity will lead to more egalitarianism as poorer people become richer. And of course, China, 800 million out of poverty, the greatest achievement in all of human history. So that's all happening on the global south, and they don't care about the NATO sanctions. They'll find a way, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's abandoning the US dollar. I think in the past hour, Ghana is talking about wanting to trade its commodities in gold. These are the real issues for most of the world. The US is only 3% of the population of the world. It's quarter of the world's imprisoned population.
Yes, I was just going to say that we do have
housing.
We do have housing. We do have housing for people of color. They're called prisons. There's still like 1.2 million.
And work, except I think it's only like 10 cents an hour.
Yeah, no, they
in prison.
Less than that. Slavery was not abolished with the 13th Amendment because they have that one part in there that says if they're convicted of a crime and you get a 10-year prison sentence, then you're working for some corporation down in Louisiana at that farm called Angola. And
they're complaining about LGBTQ rights in the developing world. And it's terrible what happened in Colorado the other day, but then it's terrible as well how the Democrats, how Joe Biden killed so many LGBTQ people, isn't it, in his wars in Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan? Or does he not realize, or sanctions regimes in Venezuela, etc.? Or do they not realize, these Democrats, that just because you murder and kill men, women, and children, regardless of whether they are men or women, or whether they're trans, or whether they're gay, or whether they're lesbian, somehow that is better because you're killing them all at the same time.
Yeah,
that's not better.
Worthy victims as opposed to worthy victims, right? Noam Chomsky.
Precisely.
About manufacturing consent. I was in D.C. I saw so many parks with pup tents. They looked like Occupy Wall Street back at Zuccotti Park in 2011. These parks in D.C. are just inundated with pup tents, homeless people, homeless veterans. They don't have any money for that, but they do have $39 billion to give to Zelensky so he can sell those arms on the black market. And they do have $9 billion to give to...
the Nazi insignia badges don't stitch themselves. Someone has to be paid a good wage to sew those things up. But I have to go soon because Brazil...
You got me with a laugh. You got me coffee, but I got to stop this. Afshin Rattansi, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Good luck. I look forward to seeing. Where can I see going underground in the next couple of weeks?
It'll be available right around the world. It'll hopefully be translated into Spanish, maybe into Chinese, into German, into French, all the different languages. It'll be broadcast around the world on the RT network. Which of course is banned in Britain, but is available still in the United States online. Obviously, Rumble, YouTube will not broadcast because YouTube is owned by Google, which of course Julian Assange exposed as a CIA cutout. So therefore, it'll be on Rumble, it'll be on through the web, and it'll be broadcasting on television right across Central and Latin America, through Africa, through the Middle East, all across Southeast Asia, India, China, and of course, Russia.
This has been a fascinating 90 minutes. John Pilger, thank you very much. He's not on right now, but thank you, John Pilger, the venerable, redoubtable John Pilger, and you, Afshin Rattansi. Thank you for appearing again today. It's been a long time, and for all your great work. people should follow Afshin on Twitter. It's Afshin Rattansi. It's at Afshin Rattansi. That's how they reach you, right? On Twitter.
Yep, and I should have put that up, Going Underground RT.
Well, we're going to put
or underscore RT, I think.
We'll put it up.
Yeah, Going Underground's Twitter account is back, and all the links will be there. Just Google it. You'll find it somewhere.
We're going to go out with something. I want to end this right now and say goodbye to everybody, and we're going to have a special piece of music to close us out, and you'll just have to listen to it. Thank you very much, Afshin, and goodbye, everybody, until next week.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls pick them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone? Gone to young men, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young men gone? Gone to soldier, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flower, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? Young girls pick them, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever